Coming up on this episode.
I'm now at a point where if I wanted to raise a lot more money into my hedge fund, I could do it.
Yeah.
I don't accept more money into my hedge fund because I make more than enough money and I have more than enough money at this point. Um, I don't even know what I would do with it. With that comes also a lot of responsibilities, I think, of which I'm not really that into. What I've found is people like to say they want to make money because money gives them freedom.
Right.
To me, freedom is about not having wants. That's really what freedom is. So it's kind of ironic that now I can go out and buy basically whatever the hell I want, and there's nothing that I want.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think that all does go back to your original question, which it goes back to this sort of, monastery type of Buddhist type of meditative type of thinking.
Could I ask you what you're tracking these days? I think you said you had three on the list, and what's today is Friday, the 25th of April, 2025.
Yen,
Yen.
yen is the major one, yeah.
You were in that earlier, weren't you? Earlier in the year?
I was, and I got stopped.
Yeah. So just waiting for a reload on that one?
I'm getting back in today.
Okay.
We had some bullish yen news overnight, and the market is failing off of that.
Could I just, since we're talking markets briefly, ask your opinion on gold? It seems like it's a market that's been heading one way for quite some time. Are you seeing that as crowded at all?
The COT has not shown crowded the gold. In fact, the COT has been showing that the speculators, who I am looking to fade at turns, have been selling gold since mid-February. I'm asking myself, why is that? And how is that possible?
Yeah.
It's not bearish. Hard to make a bearish macro story for gold here, right?
Yeah.
So how the hell are they selling it, right? So I have a couple theories as to why. I feel like I am getting to the point where I'm thinking that the risk reward of trading is maybe not that great for me anymore.
Yeah.
Um, no matter what you do, it causes a lot of stress. And when your health is not very good, stress is the last thing you want. And I did have a pretty long conversation with my wife and myself in the past week about I'm thinking about I'm thinking about retiring.
Before we get started, could I ask a quick favor? If you enjoy the show and want to support us, the simple and free way to do so is to hit the like and subscribe buttons and even share the link with a friend. It really makes a big difference and will enable us to continue to bring these conversations with the greats. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're here with Jason Shapiro. I think, if you've come this far, you probably know who Jason is, but just in case you don't, my my quick my quick fire um, description for you really is you're a mean reverter of participation, not price. And some call that contrarian. Um, Money manager, you've been a commodity trading advisor, a CTA, also worked in hedge funds, and you're currently running money as a CTA. Is that right?
Correct.
Cool. Also, you're also really active on this crowded market report, which I've been paying more attention to recently. So that is full of all kinds of insights. So that is super cool to see, and I'd like to kind of dig into that a little bit more later. I thought maybe if it's okay with you, just doing a bit of research on you and your background and stuff, the one thing that kind of stuck out to me was the time you spent in the monastery in Burma. Um, could you bring us to that time just for a minute? I mean, it sounds like you were there for about a month and you were probably what, in your 20s? And I
Yep.
think leading into that, I think you'd had good runs and then maybe a bad run right sort of ahead of that, if I'm getting my timeline right. So, like, had you just blown out of an account or something and then also ended up sort of traveling?
No, I was going to start school in London. I,
Ah,
w-
okay.
I was working in Hong Kong and I was going to start school in London. So I decided to take 3 months. The plan at the time was to take 3 months and go from Hong Kong to London without touching an airplane.
Oh, cool.
Uh, the plan didn't end up working because I went to Burma and ended up staying there for much longer than I would have thought. And so I had to fly back. I had to fly back to London from Burma.
They got a show over here in London called Race Across the World, and
Mhm.
they get like two people together, like a couple or a team, and they'll say go from I think they just started one, Shanghai to India, somewhere in India, and
Hmm.
you can't use any air travel. It's basically by, air or I'm sorry, by sea or by land, and they only give you like a grand to do it with. So you got to
Nice.
earn money along the way and that kind of thing. It's always super interesting and great. So I applaud the effort there, but it sounds like maybe it took you in the right sort of direction anyway, because you ended up at the monastery. And why did you decide to stick around?
I don't know. I went there. It's a place called Inle Lake, which is in the middle of Burma. Um, and it's a monastery in the middle of the lake there, and it's so funny to call it like a tourist attraction because relative to the to Times Square, it's not exactly a tourist attraction in the world, but I guess in Burma, as a tourist, you go to the Inle Lake and you go to the Inle Lake Monastery. Um, and I don't know, so I did that, and I was just walking around and I was kind of sitting there, and I had kind of been into Buddhism a little bit and studied some Buddhism and all that, like every white man who goes to Asia does at one point or another. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I was just sitting there, and this monk came up to me and started talking to me in like perfect English.
Wow.
Um, and we just got to talking, and he invited me to stay and for as long as I wanted, and I ended up staying for about a month.
That's very cool. Um, was it one of these sort of retreats where were you isolated, or were you just hanging out in the monastery the whole time? And was it just a peaceful place where you could kind of, I don't know, get some thoughts on by yourself? I'm assuming you were
Yeah,
by.
it was pretty isolated. There are monks there, and there are monks in training there. I kind of lived as like one of the monks in training, so to speak,
Cool.
which was isolated. But the head monk would come and speak to me, and he would speak to all of us once a day or something like that. We would always have to get together in the mornings to go and get our food, which was all given, via alms.
Right.
And then we go back to our room and kind of meditate.
Okay, so you weren't really interacting so much with the other monks either. Maybe aside from the head monk. Okay.
Not really, no.
Does it I mean, I would have thought that would have to change your perspective on things. That's a lot of time to be sort of in your own head, and these days without any technology, right? Um, did did it change your approach to life when you sort of came back to I don't know, I guess the Western world, and you end up in London at I think business school at the time. So that's a bit of a shift. But did some of that stick with you through business school and even through till today?
I hope so. I like to think so. It's funny, you talk about a shift. One of the weirdest things of this whole experience was that I had to be there for business school. Um, and So I had to leave the monastery. And literally, I was at this monastery on Inle Lake in Burma one day. I got in a car that took me to the airport. I got on a plane that took me to Bangkok airport. I switched planes. It took me to London. I got on a taxi and suddenly I was in the middle of London. So like 1 minute I was on this monastery on this lake in
Yeah.
Burma, and the next time I was basically conscious, I was in the middle of London. right? And it was like, whoa, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, that was a shift. But yeah, yeah, I like to believe that the lessons and the things that I learned there about myself and about whatever, have stuck with me throughout life. I still, that was really where I learned how to practice meditation, and I still do that. So that part of it has definitely stuck with me. And as the years go by, we're talking about almost 30 years now, 25 years or so.
Yeah.
As the years go by, the exact lessons, so to speak, fade away.
Sure.
But it definitely changed my way permanently of looking and approaching life and what's important and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, I would have, I mean, I haven't done it myself, right? But I have to imagine that like the vibe of that place would just get into you. And like, I wonder, are you able to go back there? Like if you do a meditation on your own, like these days, can you sort of, I don't know, almost transport yourself back into sort of being on the lake there or in the monastery, just for a sense of calm, maybe when the markets are going crazy or life's going crazy?
No, sort of, but again, as the year, I've never thought of it this way, but I think I feel this now and can maybe express it now. But as the years have gone on, um, other things have come along in my life, that have taught me sort of new lessons and places that I go to. A big thing for me with that monastery thing was, what's important in life, what really matters in life, think about how lucky I am anyway, right? Everything's sort of relative, all those type of things really made an impression on me when I was there. But, and still stick with me. But again, since then, I've been married, I've had children, I've been divorced, I've been remarried, so again, you reset again what's important in life. And, the whole children thing always brings that whole idea up, right? What's really important in life, right? But
Right.
for me, having gone through my first marriage, which quite frankly was just horrible, um, and the choices that I had to make in getting out of that, and the effect that it had on other people, such as my children,
Right.
um, and coming out of that, and then actually getting into a second marriage with somebody who I was very, very lucky to come across, which is the exact opposite, and it's such a good thing for me and has been such an incredible thing for me that again, what's important and all that and the whole lesson in that was had I not gone through the first marriage,
Mhm.
then this second thing wouldn't have
Right.
happened. I wouldn't have been the same person. I wouldn't have been ready for that, and it becomes like this whole 3D or 4D type chess, as they say these days, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's sort of new lessons that have come up and all those same things, but it builds upon the things that I had been sort of, I think, learning, so to speak, while I was at that monastery.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, I think I heard you say one of the things coming out of that was, you were probably, I think you were already trading, I remember in Hong Kong. You're going over to London Business School to get, was that like an MBA?
Masters in finance.
Okay. Um, I guess with the goal probably at the time to, I don't know, get a qualification so you can get, I don't know, ultimately more money, whether that's through trading on your own or through getting another job or something like that. And it sounds like after the monastery experience, you kind of came out of it thinking, okay, well, maybe that's not the most important thing in the world, which is actually quite a maybe young age to have that sort of realization. I mean, I think most of us come to that eventually, but sometimes it's way later in life.
Certainly that idea came through. I don't know if I bought into that idea until way later. I certainly spent, I was in my late 20s then. I certainly spent my 30s trying to chase as much money as I could chase. Um, I think ironically enough, I say it a lot now, oh, well, money, I'm 50, going to be 58 now, right? And I'll say that to people, and they're like, "Oh, well, you can say that because now you have money, so you can
Right.
say that
Right.
money's not the most important thing." And there's some truth to that. Um, but it's ironic in a lot of ways that I can now do the things that I thought I wanted to do at 30. Like if when I was 30, I wanted to be a billionaire and I wanted to, drive a Ferrari and all that stuff. Um, I'm now at a point where if I wanted to, I'm not going to say be a billionaire, but if I wanted to raise a lot more money into my hedge fund, I could do it.
Yeah.
I don't accept more money into my hedge fund because I make more than enough money and I have more than enough money at this point. Um, I don't even know what I would do with it. With that comes also a lot of responsibilities, I think, of which I'm not really that into.
Yeah.
Um, and I was having this deep conversation with somebody just this past weekend, who's in his 30s and is married and has these two kids and all that. And I said, like when I was 30, I wanted to be a billionaire. I wanted to drive a Ferrari. I wanted to have a car collection. I wanted to do all these things. Now I'm 50, almost 58. Um, and what I've found is people like to say they want to make money because money gives them freedom.
Right.
But what I have found is that there's nothing out there that I want to buy necessarily. Like I really don't. I
Yeah.
don't buy clothes. I don't buy, we buy food. It's not very expensive, right?
Yeah.
To me, freedom is about not having wants. That's really what freedom is. So it's kind of ironic that now I can go out and buy basically whatever the hell I want, and there's nothing that I want.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's this weird place that life has taken me. But I think that all does go back to your original question, which it goes back to this sort of, monastery type of Buddhist type of meditative type of thinking. Why I got to a place where I don't feel that I really need to purchase anything. I mean, I have a house, you know, so I have a roof,
Yeah.
and I have a car. I mean? I don't need a new car. I don't need a nicer car. When this car breaks down, I will get a new car. But we were on sort of this vacation last week and with some other people, and they all want to go shopping, shopping, shopping. And I don't know. I just got to this point where like I go to a store and I'm like, there's really nothing in here that I want. You were down in the South in Nashville, and they got these cool stores with like the boots and the hats and the Western shirts and all that stuff, and they're
Yeah.
cool. But I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want any of these things.
Yeah.
Now, that's a combination, I think, also the fact that I had been pretty poor for quite a long time, you know, and so I got used to not having money and therefore not being able to buy things.
Yeah.
So when I ended up having money. I was scared. I never wanted to go back to that place again. And now it's another level. I'm not going to go back to that place again, but I'm still just in the habit I think it just became this thing of I got so used to not being able to get things and now I don't even want them. It's a very weird place that I put myself in, but I like it.
Yeah, and you know what? No, I understand it. And I've actually found that a bit myself recently. You go out to shops and that sort of thing. It's like, yeah, you know what? I don't really find any of that interesting. And I probably did at one time, and I wanted to have a lot of things, but then it's become stuff that clutters up life, and you end up having to deal with to get rid of, or it goes out of date, or something like that, right? So yeah, I think it's that. I've heard you talk about like that pursuing happiness. I know it's a bit cliche, right? But and if happiness is freedom, and then realizing that maybe freedom doesn't actually cost that much. I mean, for you to be able to do what you want to do with your time is probably one of the most like the most important things, and in good health, at the same time, because there's no point in having a lot of time if you can't enjoy it. If you've ever been taken out by an illness or an injury, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about there. I've had some back issues recently, and it just kind of lays you out, and you're like, oh man, I feel like you can't do anything. So you really gotta kind of focus on that first.
Yeah, that part I have admittedly failed on, but
I mean,
I've
yeah,
not, I've not done a good job of taking care of my health, and now in my late 50s, that's starting to catch up to me.
yeah.
Pretty cool.
I mean, it's never too late to start sorting that out. It's amazing what the body can do.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying because I really am. I'm breaking down. So
All right. I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can write that ship too. Um, you're probably familiar with Van Tharp. Have you heard of him?
yeah,
Yeah, from Market Wizards, and he's had an institute. I've spent a lot of time at his institute before when it was around and when he was around. Unfortunately, he's not anymore. But I found it interesting because he had a program that he called it the Super Trader program, and he would get people to come in, and they would, he would try to give them the get to the bare bones of what would make them happy ultimately, I think was his aim. And people come in wanting to trade, wanting to make all this money, and he'd kind of make them slow down and learn to trade properly and then figure out what they actually want. And a lot of them ended up not trading. And that was actually the right thing for them. And I've heard you say before, trading is pain, right? And so, I mean, can you fault somebody for realizing, at whatever time that actually, you know what, I'm not sure I want to be actually doing this all the time. Um, but so you came out of the monastery experience, you went to London Business School, you continued to trade, right? So the monastery experience, meaning like what do you want to do with your time and your life? Obviously, you've got money on your mind when you're at that sort of age. Um, but do you find, despite the pain of trading, does it make you happy? Does it like the sheer puzzle and game of the whole thing and fascination, I guess, is kind of what keeps me going in this space. So I mean, there's got to be a bit of a balance there. But do you, or did you, and do you still find it interesting, challenging?
it's always challenging. It's always interesting. Um, I'm not gonna lie. I'm getting to the point with my health not doing very well. I'm getting to the point, and because I've done a good job of saving my money,
Yeah,
um, I feel like I am getting to the point where I'm thinking that the risk reward of trading is maybe not that great for me anymore.
yeah,
Um, no matter what you do, it causes a lot of stress. And when your health is not very good, stress is the last thing you want. And I did have a pretty long conversation with my wife and myself in the past week about I'm thinking about I'm thinking about retiring. Um,
yeah,
but the problem is retiring to what?
right.
This is what I do. This is what I like to do. This keeps my mind active. This keeps me going. This keeps my brain active. Now, one of the reasons that I agreed to start the crowded market report, which is this thing that we do, was that could keep me going. That's something that could keep me going. I'm helping people learn how to trade. I'm engaging with people that are doing things, and that keeps my brain going. So that might be the one way that I can stay active. But you don't want to sit here and just. I mean, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Steve Cohn always said, golf's great until you have to play 5 days a week, right?
Yeah, anything, right?
All
Yeah,
right.
and
So I literally here, I wake up, what am I going to do for the next 15 hours? You
yeah.
know,
Well, I
I
mean,
could I could go and give my time to charity. There are other things that you could do, you know,
well, I
and
mean, it was something I was going to ask you about. Was I kind of see you've got almost two roles that are doing a similar thing. On one side, you're managing people's money, other people's money, and on the other side, you've got a community that you've started with the Crowded Market Report. And those two really do sort of, it seems to me like they intersect and intertwine. And so if, I would imagine that there's different stresses. One of them is, if you're managing other people's money, sometimes you inherit their psychology. I suspect that you've been in the game for a while, so you're probably pretty well at handling that and building up some I guess self-protection, to that, and maybe some barriers to and probably you can be selective about clients so that they understand what you do and probably leave you alone at this stage. Um, but that there's a different sort of stress involved when the numbers are bigger. And then on the other side, you've got this sort of community, which I imagine is, you seem like you enjoy that. I mean, you're active with the guys. It seems like every day, pretty much, you're on YouTube, giving an update. You're staying involved. You're staying active, um, and you're providing a service. So it's kind of like I was going to ask you later about like a mission or a legacy, and it kind of seems to me like you're in a stage where and you have been for some time actually. You've been very generous with your way of doing things and trying to explain it to people so that they can um, at least understand it and perhaps do it for themselves, or figure out their own way of doing it, which might be slightly tweaked because we all sort of need to find our own way. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to do it exactly your way. Um, so, do you get more out of the community, would you say, these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Some days, you wonder, I mean, like you say, the whole point of it is to try and help people, hopefully, learn how to be better traders.
Yeah,
I'm not the greatest trader that's ever lived. Okay. My way of trading is not the only way of trading. My way of approaching the market is not the only way of approaching the market. But I say a lot to these guys like, you should be better than me because you have the advantage. I trade my way, but you can take some things from me, some things from other places, take the best from a whole bunch of different people, put them together, and you can be better than all of us, right?
yeah,
So that's the piece. I think that the way I approach the market is a little bit different than how most people do it. So maybe there's some value there. The return stream that I have produced for the last whatever 25 years has been good. So there must be something to at least something that I'm doing that has some value. Um, Hopefully we can extract that. I have actually learned as I've gone with this thing that might be coming from different places than I originally thought it was coming from, quite frankly, because I've never analyzed it so deeply as I've been able to as I speak to other people about it and they bring it
yeah,
up like, hey, this, but that, and this, but that. So um, I'm learning as I go here too about myself and about my own process, which
yeah,
is kind of fun and interesting. Um, and then, we have this was, there was real no intention when we started this thing, but one of the great things that's happened is we've attracted some really good people. And I consistently encourage, you know, don't just come on here to copy trade what I'm doing because that's just not going to work for you.
yeah,
I put my trades on there so that people can follow this like my own psychology of how I'm approaching the trade, right? Not for them to copy trade me. Now, some people I know do. Um, I
yeah,
think I think it's I think it's a mistake for many reasons, but we do have a bunch of people on there that are doing all different kinds of things. We have people that are, I don't day trade. We have day traders, we have options traders, we have people looking at, and they're sharing it, and everybody is kind of learning, right? And that's become an incredible part of it, that wasn't the plan. There was no plan going in. I didn't know what this was going to become, I had no idea. Um, but that has become what I think is probably the best part of this whole thing is all the different people that we've attracted and all the different approaches they have. And all of a sudden people are on there and they're working together on different things. You know what I mean? And to me, that's cool as hell. You know, I,
yeah,
I always say, they're like, what's your goal with this? I'm like, my goal with this is to have it last beyond me.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
hopefully if people will continue to, what I do, okay, there's enough people on there that have been on there for long enough, they get it already. Yeah, what do you do? Okay, everybody gets long and I look to go short. I mean, it's not that complicated, right? So that they can talk about forever, but then also what they're adding and all that. I'd like to see us go on a lot longer than me and give this a community of people that want to trade and take trading seriously and want to keep an open mind toward how trading works and doesn't work and all that.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's that's what makes a market, right? Is having different views, different approaches, and the having guys like you who have been willing to, talk about what you do. As you've seen, like in the various Market Wizards books, right? You pick up one of those, you read about all the guys, you say, "Oh wow, I really love what those guys are doing," and then you read the next guy, and you're like, "Wow, I love what he's doing too." And you got to find your own way for which way is going to work for you. Um,
You have to.
and
Yeah. I
one
think
thing,
that's what so many people, I believe, miss, you know.
yeah,
And we've actually had people on there. Well, we had a guy on there, I don't know, like a month ago or something like that. And he made some comment about what I was saying. And he goes, I didn't, he goes, and I think it's like $100 a month or something, joint thing. He goes, I don't pay $100 a month, so I have to think. Because I'm like, everyone has to take their own approach. You have to think and approach this in your way. He goes, I don't pay $100 a month to be here so that I have to think. I'm like, well, then you're wasting your money. You know what
you're
I mean?
missing the point, right?
I really don't care, quite frankly. I don't make any money off this thing anyway, between me and you. So, like, I don't really care. So that's also a good thing that's going on with the community. If someone's a jerk or whatever like that, I
Yeah,
just cut 'em off. We just cut them right off. I don't need them. Go away. That's not what we're here for, right?
yeah,
But it's like, yeah, I don't pay $100 a month, so I have to think. I'm like, well,
yeah,
then you're in the wrong place.
yeah,
You're wasting $100 a month. Then you should go away, right?
yeah.
I'm not here to say, copy trade me and you're going to be a millionaire and all this bullshit that people lay out there because I know the pitfalls in that, right? Uh, so
There's plenty of things you could go spend $100 on and not think. But the problem is, it's probably not going to make you any money either.
no, and they'll learn that, and then that's I think
Maybe
the
it's part
decision
of the
that
process.
people have to make it if they want to get involved with like our community and all that. Like I actually used to say we shouldn't allow anybody to join this community that can't prove to us that they've blown out at least one account. Because I don't think that they will get or accept or want to accept the things that I'm talking about on here until they've done that.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it's bizarre because we have people do things, guys love to get on there and talk about the trades they're doing and all that. And sometimes it's the exact opposite of some of the things I talk about, which is fine. You don't have to trade my way, but I don't know. Sometimes it's weird to me. But having said that, I have gotten many, many messages from people that have joined, have sent me messages saying, I've really helped them change their way of thinking and we've turned around their trading and turned around their financial life. And so that kind of stuff is very rewarding to me.
Yeah.
At this age, you start to look for things other than how much money can I make for myself, you know?
Right. Right.
There's other values in life that you don't think of when you're 30. When you're 30, it's about how much can I get for myself, right? At least it was for me and most people.
Yeah.
When you're approaching 60, you start to think in a little different way. In
Sure.
particular, when I think you've made enough money so that you start to think what other values can I add in life. So yeah, so that's what that whole thing's become.
Well, I was thinking about it. I was rereading your chapter in the Unknown Market Wizards there, and you didn't really want to participate in that for quite a long time. It seemed like you were happy to talk to Jack for a bit, and then it kind of came down to it, and it was a no, and then finally you sort of caved and said, "Okay, yeah, let's just do it." And I was just kind of reflecting on sort of where you're at currently, and that was maybe one of those decisions where you many traders are quite introverted and like being sort of behind the scenes and not in the public light. And I guess that kind of thrust you into the public light and maybe enabled this whole crowded market report community and your presence on YouTube and you're really kind of, in my view, you're helping out a lot of people just by talking about your experiences in such a frank way. Um, so do you see that now sort of as are you pleased with the decision to kind of be in the book in hindsight?
Oh yeah, without having been in that book, this whole crowded market report thing wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Um, and like we were sort of saying before, where life ends up going based on the decisions you make can be pretty funny because I wasn't thinking, oh, I'll be in the book and that'll lead to a community. I think I didn't even know that these kind of things existed.
Right. Right.
Um, I didn't really, I wasn't that interested in being in the book, because what for? I wasn't looking for fame. I wasn't looking to raise money. I managed all the money that I wanted to. So I didn't really see the upside, um, which is ironic because when I was a 23-year-old trader and I first read that book, it was always my dream. If you asked me my dream at 23, it would be I want to be in a Market Wizards book, right?
Right. Right.
And again, you get there and it's like, okay, well, now I
Yeah.
really don't need to be or want to be, right?
Yeah.
I I ended up agreeing because my friends, who were with me at 23 years old, were like, dude, you're going in the book. That's all there is to it. We used to quote that stupid book every single day, all day,
Yeah.
right? And now you got a chance to be in this book. Just shut up. You're going in. So I was like, okay, I agreed with that. And I did it, and it was fine, and it was fun and all that. But and Jack's a good guy, but then because of that, people started, I didn't know this, but I'm not, I never was on Twitter. I was never on any of this stuff. I was on the LinkedIn.
Right.
All of a sudden I started getting a lot of messages on the LinkedIn, hey, I read your chapter and it really resonated with me. Can you help me learn the things that you're saying? Or can I come work for you? Or, can I come and make you coffee? All that. And I really didn't know what to say to that. Happy to help people. I was helped when I was younger by people that didn't need to help me, and they sort of passed that idea of the legacy on, to help other people learn. But I didn't know how I was going to help all those people. I was like, I'd love to help you, but this is what I would say to everybody, but I can't help 200 people at the same time. I have a business, I have kids, I have a family. And one guy was like, look, I can centralize it. I can start that on a web page and we can centralize it and all that. And I said, hey, man, you want to do that? Go for it. And he
Yeah.
did. And then it just kind of went from there. So yeah, it's funny how life, and the decisions that you make work.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, if you think about it, like the guys that you read about in the book helped form your opinion of what trading was going to be like for you. And, using guys who were experienced, who'd been in the game for a long time, right? And so, at the time of you going into the book, it seems like it's all about you. And your friends are saying, oh, yeah, go in the book. You have to, because we quoted that book every day. It seems like it's more about you at that point. But I think if you look back on it now, it's actually that's part of the legacy is you becoming one of the guys that other people like myself and probably many people in the community look to and say, "Oh, cool. Here's a guy who's doing it, who's had a hard time with it. He's honest about it, and he's figured out his way, and actually his way makes
I
more sense."
still have a hard time with it, by the way. And I think that's an
Yeah,
important lesson for everybody to see as well. Why I take
yeah,
people through my trades and why I'm trading is because I want them to see, okay, I was in Market Wizards. Okay, I've had some good success in this business finally, right? But I still struggle like hell. This year I'm flat on the year. We're going into May.
almost May. Yeah,
I haven't made a dime this year. Now I haven't lost a dime, but I haven't made a dime this year,
yeah,
in 4 months, right? I've only had like 4 or 5 trades, which is almost nothing, right?
yeah,
And the struggle, but it's important for people to see that too, and the struggles that go along with that, with not trading and disciplined, and all that. Like these are the lessons as far as my trading goes that I'm trying to pass along, right? Not, oh, this is exactly how I trade and this is what you should do. I do go through that, but the truth is that's not where the value is, I don't think. The value is in saying, hey, I'm struggling just like you may be struggling, right? I may be struggling less because I through experience and through some of my data and all that was telling me that this maybe was going to be a difficult period for what I do. So therefore I kind of backed off, right?
right.
Uh, so maybe I'm struggling less because of that, but shit, I haven't made a freaking dime this year, so.
Well, that sounds. You said what, 4 or 5 trades so far this year? What's a normal year in like number of trades for you?
We're around 40,
Okay.
40, 40 to 60.
So January, February, March, April. So and four trades in 4 months would be lower than average number of trades per year then.
Much, much, much lower than average.
So just
Yes.
not find any opportunities. And that's
From my
actually
process, the opportunities aren't there.
that's what I mean. And so like the discipline to be able to recognize that and not force a trade because you get a bit antsy or because shit, I've got investors or now I've got this community and they're all watching me, all that shit.
Yes, no, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. The investor part has become a little easier because, like you say, I've had my investors for a while. They trust me. I was able to be pretty selective about who I manage money for now for a
Yeah.
number of reasons. Because I didn't need to be a big shot. Because I work for myself. I don't have people working for me. I don't have a big expense base, so I didn't need to just take any client I could get. So I was able to get clients that understand what it is I do,
Yeah.
what it is I'm supposed to do for their portfolio, right? So that makes it a little easier. Also, I don't charge management fees specifically for this reason. I get a little bit higher incentive fee on the back end because of that,
Yeah.
but I don't charge management fee, which again is a function of the fact that I keep my business simple. I don't have big expenses to cover, so I don't have to charge management fee. But even more important, because of that, that helps me with my discipline of not having to chase. No one's going to call me up and say, "Why am I paying you 2% a year? You haven't made a trade in 6 weeks."
Right.
Well,
Right.
you're not paying me 2% a year. You're paying me zero.
Right.
Okay. So, I don't have to feel that guilt or that pressure either, which is
Yeah.
a benefit to all this, which again are lessons that I learned along the way. These are all lessons I learned along the way.
Yeah, and that goes to show like, the size of shop in a way, right? If you had a bigger if you had more assets under man, what do you I think I heard you say you're running about 200 million.
A little less than that. Yeah.
Okay. And but you've had more in the past, am I right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, with more requires more sort of everything. You think it might be ultimately scalable, and I guess it is to an extent, but you end up needing some more infrastructure or people or just things to manage that. And then all of that costs money because you got to pay all those people or the service providers or whatever, right? And so now you need sort of like a management fee so that you don't freak out when there's no money coming in for 4 months or something like that, right?
Yes.
Um,
Then puts the pressure on you to trade, which then makes you make
right.
more bad trades, which then brings your returns down. So yes, it's that whole
It can
s-
spiral. Yeah.
snowball effect.
Yeah. So extreme discipline to be able to maintain, what you do and set things up that way. Quick aside.
But again, it's also a function of, going back to what we originally talked about. It's how I
Yeah.
set up my life. You know what I
Right.
mean? I don't spend money on what I consider unnecessary things. I don't spend anywhere near the amount of money that I have or that I bring in. So therefore, you know what I mean? If I'm flat and I only get paid when I make money. So, okay, it's April. I haven't gotten paid anything, but you know what? That's okay because I don't spend any money. I don't need it. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a car payment. You know what I mean? The only thing I really spend money on is when I go on vacations,
Yeah.
and those are up to me. You know what I mean? If I feel like I'm not making any money or whatever, then I won't go on vacation, So it's all one is a function of the other.
Yeah. Um, as we're on the topic of just funds and assets under management, do you have a view like if somebody were starting out now, um, running their own hedge fund, CTA, that sort of thing, do you have a view on how much money you would need in order to make it worthwhile?
If you're running your own CTA, I would say a minimum of $20 million.
Okay.
Um, a hedge fund is more because now CTA is pretty cheap to run because your NFA, your CFTC, it's not that hard. I think I started my CTA with $8,000. A hedge fund's a different story because now you're SEC.
Right.
And to put together that stuff and a lawyer to do all that stuff, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Do you operate as a CTA these days or as a
Yeah,
fund?
yeah,
CTA.
I'm a CTA, yeah.
Yeah.
So, a hedge fund that deals in equities and deals in all that is once you get into SEC regulation, it becomes a lot more expensive.
Gotcha. So I asked, do you know Perry Kaufman or know of him?
I do know Perry Kaufman.
Yeah, he was over here in London a month or two ago, and I got to sit down and talk to him. And so I asked him the same question, and his answer surprised me. He said that he'd actually done a bit of a study on it these days, and this is not for a CTA. I think this is going to be more for a hedge fund that he has in mind, right? But he reckoned you needed 1 billion to make any money these days. Now that's maybe a bit different. And I think, what he's got in mind is all the people that you got to pay and the infrastructure you got to get set up and regulation and all of that, which is maybe a bit more tricky than it was back in his day.
For
Uh,
a hedge fund, yes, but like I say, for a CTA, here's my CTA. You're looking at every employee there is, okay?
yeah,
And you're looking at our head office,
right.
okay? I'm looking at two screens. That's what I have, right? Now, granted, I was able to do this because of what I've done before, right? I had the track record and I built the relationships over the years, and so I was able to get to this, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, do the math. If you got $20 million, even if you charge 1 in 20, well, what's that? That's $200,000 a year in management fee.
Mhm.
Um, you're not going to live huge on $200,000 a year, but you shouldn't live huge if you're not making any money as a trader anyway, right? $200,000 you can probably run between paying for your execution stuff and your feeds and all that. Um, you're self-employed, so now you have to pay for your own health insurance as well.
Mhm.
You can probably run one of these things on 75 grand a year.
Okay.
So it leaves you $130,000 to live your life,
Yeah.
which is
That's before.
which isn't a lot, but you're not making any money. So for your clients, so you shouldn't have a lot. But now let's say you put up 10% a year on $20 million. You know what's that? 2 million bucks?
Yeah.
And you're getting paid 20% of that, $400,000. Well,
Well,
$400,000 isn't a bad living at all, right?
yeah.
And obviously you started. Now you're doing well. You can raise more money. You can double that, and pretty soon you can make $1 million. So I don't see why at 200,000 at $20 million you couldn't make a CTA work.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Fair
is
enough.
Terry Kaufman doing these days?
He's in Chicago still, mainly. He's well doing what he always does. I mean, he still trades, he still manages his own money. I think he's managing outside money a little bit. Um, and he's still active in doing writing. And his wife is she's a trader too. She was a pit trader, and so
Yeah.
she still trades that way. But he trades in like classic CTA trend following style for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, I crossed his path when I worked at Graham Capital. He worked there at the same time as I did.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We talked about that. Yeah, that was Were you considered when you were at Graham? Were you considered a discretionary trader? Because they were
Yeah.
originally systematic, and then they kind of added a discretionary desk, I think, right?
Yeah, I was on that desk.
Okay. Because I recall you saying that when you started working at one of these firms, you made it quite quantitative. Like they gave you a quant or something and a bunch of money, and you were able to basically systemize a lot of what you were doing, it sounded like.
Yeah, I was later. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Would you consider what you do these days, how systematic is it, or how much of your own sort of subjectivity do you integrate?
It's a mix. I mean, I follow a process very, very closely.
Yeah.
So you could call that systematic because it's a definite process that I could explain in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, However, within that process, there is some discretionary reads, like if I'm buying a market because I think that there was bad news on that market and the market can't go down on that bad news. Well, that's kind of who said it was bad news? Bad news based on what? What's the bad news? Is that bad news? What's bad news and what's good news? That's a discretionary read, you know. So there's a discretionary read for me in that. But other than that, I follow a process very. I don't wake up in the morning and go, okay, well, where am I going to try to make money today? You know,
Right,
like I know these are the trades that are set up to buy. These are the trades that are set up to sell. Now I just got to see if there's news and how the market reacts to that news. Okay,
right,
that's my expression, but it's only valid in these three markets that are set
right.
up, right? And here's my stops. And if I'm in a trade and there's my stop and I can fit, then I'm stopped and move on to the next thing. Like that's all very systematic, so to speak. Um,
Yeah, so it sounds to me like the setup for that with all the work you do with the COT reports, the setup is quite I don't know, mechanical, I guess, right?
yeah,
So you're going to
yes,
know which ones are sort of like in, these are the trades we're looking to take part in, but like you've said many times before, look for that market confirmation. Confirmation for you is that news failure idea, usually, right?
yes,
Or is that all the time? Does there always have to be some sort of news failure event?
yes. You
Okay.
can define what news failure is. You know, news failure sometimes is based off of a piece of news. Donald Trump tweets this, or China tweets that, or the GDP, or the employment, whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah,
These are pieces of news. Sometimes I read it news as like the correlations, right? All the this is a risk on asset that I'm looking to get long. All the risk on assets today are getting crushed, except the one that I'm looking to get long was getting crushed and actually finished the day higher.
right.
So I could see that as a news event too. I call it a correlation failure.
Okay,
To me, that's just another news failure. The news being all these markets are getting crushed.
right. And this one's doing something different, so we've got a signal here. Yeah.
Right, right.
Okay. Do you ever see like is there a news like a news confirmation event where what let's say a couple weeks back when the market got crushed after Liberation Day, right? The market
Uh-huh.
down heavy. And then, Trump comes out and says, oh, we're going to delay things 90 days. The market fires up 10%.
Right.
Is that a signal to you at all? I mean, like,
No,
even if you, with the presupposition that you were actually looking to get long because the markets
right.
were all tanking. Um,
No. I don't buy that. I won't buy good news and I won't sell bad news.
okay.
Doesn't mean that sometimes I miss markets. Yeah, I miss markets all the time, but
Yeah.
no matter what you do, you're going to miss. You know, I have 37 markets that I trade. Each one of them goes either up or down every single day, right? So
Yeah.
theoretically, I'm missing, 37 opportunities every single day, right?
All right.
But no, I don't like chase on the long side good news or short into bad news. I just don't do that. There's no information there for me, you know?
Yeah.
There's no, the tea leaves aren't telling, okay, good news came out, the market went up. Okay,
Yeah.
what's next? Like that doesn't tell me anything. Bad news came out and the market went up. That's to me, that's information.
Yeah. When it doesn't work, um, and you take a loss on that. And maybe I can ask you about some of the position sizing stuff in a minute. But when it doesn't work and you take the loss, um, how many times do you try that same market again, assuming that the setup is still valid? Like the over, let's say over.
Unlimited amounts of time.
Okay.
If the setup is still valid,
Yeah.
then I'm looking to take the trade when I get a confirmation, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what I thought you'd say. Has that been, do any long streaks come to mind in which, shit, I've tried this 5 times already and it's still not.
Not really, not really.
Okay.
I mean, what up until about the past 2 years, in particular, one trade really wouldn't matter that much because I would have a bunch of trades on, and then I would look at my portfolio and I would know where the different things were correlated, and you know what I mean. So I would have like a more balanced portfolio. The last couple of years, for whatever reason, have not been like that. I've had like one trade on, two trades on. So one trade I think makes matters more to me now than it used to.
Yeah.
But historically, that happening, okay, 5 times or whatever. didn't matter that much because I would have other trades going on that
Right.
maybe negative correlation to that trade anyway. So, it was okay. Now it's a little, I don't, for whatever reason, I'm not getting very many trades and I'm certainly not getting multiple trades, so it makes it a little bit harder for me right now, but
Okay. And I remember you saying that, like, I think what average win rate for you is something like what, 35, 37%,
somewhere around there. Yeah.
which is which is not bad. Especially for, what's often considered sort of like a reversal, even though like we were talking about it in the mean reversion sense. You're using tight quite tight stops, I think.
Yeah.
So, that's not so bad. And but then when those trades work, what's the sort of usual or average payoff?
Like four times,
Okay.
5 to 1 over time.
Yeah. So, you take if one doesn't work 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row, it's once it starts to work, it'll probably end up making up for itself.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be that one. It could be another one. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
this one doesn't work 4 times in a row, but this one did work, so it'll make up for that anyway, right? Hopefully.
Um, how about on the position sizing side? I've heard you say that you risk a fraction or a percentage of your capital, your trading capital there. Could I ask you what sort of percentage it is?
So I risk 70 basis points per trade.
So 0.7% basically?
Yep.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the return stream that I'm looking for, which is somewhere between 12 and 15% a year with about a max drawdown of about 5.
Oh wow. Okay, that's great. Is the 0.7 based on, I mean, usually we base that on the drawdown side or the downside, right? So did you arrive at zero point 0.7 factoring in what sort of drawdowns or volatility you were looking
Yeah.
for?
Yeah. The volatility, that puts me in a volatility of about 6 or 7.
Okay. That's quite
Um,
low. Yeah.
which is where I want to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what that sizing is.
So
I
that
could,
must mean especially if you've only got, maybe a few trades on at any one time, even when those trades are coming and they're firing, right? You probably got a lot of cash sitting around a lot of the time too, just because you don't need that much in order to place many of these futures trades. They tend to be quite levered up anyway, right? So do you do anything in particular with cash that's sitting around?
I have nothing to do with the cash, because all my accounts are separately managed accounts,
Oh,
which
okay.
means they open up a futures account, they give me discretion to trade that futures account. And what most of them will do, since they're institutional clients, is obviously they have a bunch of relationships. So within their brokerage house, that money will automatically switch between where the margin is needed. So there's not like extra cash sitting in those accounts. When I
Okay.
look at them, they're just meeting margin. At the end of the day, whatever's not used for margin gets swept, I'm sure, into some interest-bearing security or something.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, could I ask you what platform you use for like the actual execution side?
I use trading technologies.
TT. Okay. Cool. And then you're using TradingView a lot on the charts that you show on YouTube and stuff. Is that just because you like the charts?
I use TradingView because the guys who work at Crowded Market Report,
Uh,
they developed a COT indicator using the stuff that I do, that was put on TradingView.
gotcha.
So it's great because I can see the all my COT stuff
Is rely real time with the chart, right?
right there on. They did a really good job with that, which I got to say is the other thing that I didn't know about what was going to happen with this crowded market report. But my the guy who came to me and started this thing has he's been unreal. Quite frankly, I never even met him. You know,
Yeah.
I just kind of went into business with him thinking, what's the downside? You know what I mean? If I don't like it, then I could just leave, right?
Right.
But yeah, he's been unreal. He has put together a whole bunch of stuff, including like these charts on TradingView using our stuff and all kinds of other things too. So yeah, that's why I use a TradingView because I like to show the COT charts and that's what he built them into.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what TradingView was, man. I gotta tell you. You know,
Yeah.
we have a Discord. I didn't even know what Discord was. So
Yeah, there's all kinds of tools out there these days. You know, I use TradingView a lot myself just because it's quick, it's easy. I'm a bit of a techie coder guy, so I can code up indicators and that sort of stuff with it, and I enjoy doing that. It helps me out. I feel like I have control. Um, on the we were talking about the downsides a minute ago. Is there any sort of like you've set things up so that you're risking 0.7% of capital per trade. Is there a limit where you sort of bench yourself if things don't go well? Have you pre-planned for that? Like, or so for if that were to ever happen, do you have a process for what you do just to kind of like say, okay, let me take a step back?
I don't. I mean, I haven't had a drawdown go past 5%
Okay.
in 20 something years. If it did go through 5%, I would have to sit back and maybe take a look and talk to my clients and see what's going on. I can't. I take this. I guess everyone would say this, but I take it pretty personally. Um, I can't spend my life losing money from my clients.
Yeah.
You know, the stress would just would get to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I say, this all goes back to the fact and the reason why I've been very sort of cheap, you know, and saved my money so that should that day occur, I can walk away knowing that I didn't do anything other than what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
I did my very best, and if it stopped working, then it stopped working, and I can walk away because I've saved my money, you know. So I guess that's where we would go if that were to happen.
Cool. That makes total sense to me.
I
Uh,
mean, it would be a million paper cuts, you know. Like I say,
yeah.
we're 4 months into this year, and it's been horrible. And I'm basically, you know, up whatever, 30 basis points on the year or something like that, right? So for
Yeah.
me to lose 5%, um, it can happen, but I feel like it would take some time for it to happen.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I mean, it also makes sense. I mean, I think the one of the reasons your approach is so powerful is that it is like the opposite to the CTA trend following approach in a good way. In that, those guys are going to be in all kinds of stuff for very long periods of time. And for anybody who's sort of allocating capital, and has got some CTA trend following in there, it would seem like your approach would really kind of complement theirs, right? So like when you're doing well, CTA trend following probably is drawing down a bit. Have you found that, or have you found that do your clients prefer, or do they actually specifically come to you because they can get like a different sort of correlation return stream from
I
the
think
other stuff that we.
that's what it all is.
Yeah,
When I was raising money, um, the conversations that I would have with guys was do not give me money based on my returns, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, right?
yeah,
But I had a CTA before, and people were giving me money based on returns. And so therefore, as soon as I had 3 down months, they'd be calling me up saying I suck and why do they ever give me money? And it was just horrible, right? And they don't know the damage you're doing to a trader when they do things like that, right? You're just making
right,
things worse. You're not making it better, right? You're getting in their head, which is the last place you want to be, right?
right,
So this time around, when I started this, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, I used to tell them, don't give me money based on my return history. Give me money based on my correlation history. I can't promise you that my returns are going to maintain what they have been, but I can come pretty close to promising you that my correlation to things like trend following will maintain what just based on the approach that I take. You know, that the correlation is going to be very low to negative to trend following. So yes, and therefore people that understand that to me, which is such an easy concept, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't go by that concept. Um, that's the kind of client I want, first of all. If you can't understand that concept, I don't want you to be a client because I don't
right,
think you're not going to be around for very long anyway.
right.
or B, that's really what I add to, and that's part of the reason I didn't want to get into it, but part of the reason why copy trading me is not necessarily the greatest thing to do because your goal is different than my goal. My
Right.
goal is, yes, to create positive returns, but to do so in a negatively correlated way for my clients because that's the piece of the puzzle that I am for them. They have trend following, they have whatever the hell else in their portfolio. They don't need me for that. They need me for this negatively correlated thing. So yeah, that's why people come to me, I like to believe. And that's why, yeah, it's pretty essential to have that in your portfolio. It's not easy to find something that has
No.
over time has positive return expectations with high negative correlation. And
Right.
that's why I can raise money, and that's why I have clients, quite frankly. It has nothing to do with my stellar personality or my boyish good looks. It's strictly the return and the correlation that the negative correlation that comes with it.
Yeah. How about for what we've been talking about what you do for your clients? For your own money, is it exactly the same, or do you mix in other strategies or systems or retirement accounts that do
I can't really actively trade my own money, in
okay,
particular in the futures market, because there's a conflict of interest there.
right, right.
Um, and there's also a regulatory freaking nightmare because of the conflict of interest.
So you
So
just don't.
I just don't. And this way, when they do my audits, they say, show us your futures, your personal futures account. And I say there's no such thing. They don't exist, which they don't.
Okay.
So that part of the audit is over, right? Um, but there's a conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
So
What about like retirement accounts then?
yeah, my retirement accounts have been sitting in, you know, long index funds,
Okay.
you know, and that which is very hard to do as a trader. But the truth is, over time, that's done well for me.
Yeah.
And there are times where, like, I pulled back this year. I had a really nice year last year. I get paid, call it 90% of my income comes in on January 15th. Um,
Okay.
so on January 15th, I got paid on last year, and I didn't put any of that stuff in the stock market. I sort of just put it all into treasury bills,
Yeah.
until I could figure out what I want to do with it. Which again is a function of a few things. One, I could say, oh, it's because I thought that the stock market was going to come down. I mean, yeah, but I always think the stock market is going to come down. So, truthfully, that's not the great answer. I think I have enough exposure to the stock market at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I don't really need any more, you know. So therefore, I just kind of put it away until I um, figure something out to do with that money. I'm happy to just earn T-bill rates at this point until something comes up.
Oh, and I mean the nice thing about that is that you are, the work, your usual work, your usual system is, it's not hedging's not the right word. It's another uncorrelated stream with what's going on in your retirement accounts. So,
That's right.
you're doing what your clients are doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, from an earnings point of view, I'm way overexposed. While I don't trade my own money in my system,
Right.
because of the conflict, um, from an earnings point of view, I'm way overexposed to my system. You know what I mean? Whatever I make in the stock market, if the stock market doubles, um, it's going to be minor compared to if I have a 30% year in the money that I'm managing, you know what I mean? I'm going to make much more there, right? So my exposure to that is way high in a way.
Yeah. Um, could I ask you just a little bit about your system itself? I know the you're looking for markets that have too many people on one side, right? And specific people, like the large speculators. You use that news confirmation for entry. I know that you tend to find an initial stop for exits, that are pretty close. So it sounds like preferred would be like to actually pick the day, like the day of that sort of news failure event. Um, so that lines up your stop to be pretty tight, right? Now, I imagine it probably doesn't always line up that well. Like sometimes would it not be that the market's already been, say, moving in the direction that you were looking to take your trade for a few days or a week or something like that, and then
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I'll catch the exact high or low.
yeah,
Sometimes it won't be for a few days later.
gotcha.
I just had a trade that we put on today where the market topped actually Monday to on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Getting in today, but I'm getting in against today's high. So I'm still only risking because today was the news failure event. So I'm risking that 1 day worth of volatility.
Okay, cool.
So
Um,
where were we? We were talking about
yeah.
stock. Anything?
I was just curious. So we talked about a trade and the initial stop going in, and sometimes that's on the day, sometimes maybe the initial stop being like a swing higher, a swing low might happen a few days before. And I'm guessing you're sizing your position based on your entry to that initial stop, right? For that 0.7%.
Yes.
Um, what about other exits? So let's assume that the trade is working a bit, or maybe if we start with a profit exit. I know that you've said, you want to get out of the trade when the participation kind of mean reverts, right? It kind of goes back to normal, and so the edge that you were initially exploiting isn't really there anymore. Um,
Exactly.
is that how do you determine where that point is? Is it strictly based on, say, COT reports? And
Here, COT data
okay,
is indexed between 0 and 100.
yeah,
When it gets down below 5, that's when I'm looking to get long. When it gets above 95, that's when I'm looking to get short.
uh-huh,
When it goes back to 50, that's when I take my profit.
okay. And that's going to happen. Like you're not going to know about that until what, a Friday evening after the close, isn't it, when the COT is reported? So is it like the next Monday when you actually exit, or do you
COT comes out about 3:30 on Friday. So depending on the market, I'll know Friday
okay,
by the close. Um, but having said that, I have an algo that runs a daily COT as well,
okay,
so which doesn't always nail it, but it does a decent job. And in particular, in those cases, the COT doesn't move that crazy, over the course of a week. But
yeah,
let's say the COT was at 0 and I bought this thing and it's
yeah,
been going my way for a month, for 6 weeks. And last week I run the data and now COT is at 47. And I have to wait for it to get 50 to get out.
yeah,
So I know as of last Tuesday, it was at 47. And then Wednesday, the market went up. Thursday, the market went up. Friday, the market went up, right?
yeah, yeah,
At some point, my algo will kick in and say, we're at 50, and
yeah,
it will kick me out. And then
okay,
I might get the data on Friday and it said, oh, it actually isn't at 50 yet.
right,
And then I have to make a decision on what to do. But usually at that point, I'll just say, well, screw it.
yeah, close
I
enough, right?
I made what I made, and I'm not going to do something stupid now.
So is it do you pay attention to price action at all? Like let's say, that in that case COT gets back to 50 from whichever way you were going, but then the market is just continuing to move in your favor. Like do you wait for any sort of reversal, or do you literally just say, we hit the point, let's bail.
We hit the point, let's bail
Okay.
for my exits.
Yeah,
That's what the edge was. It doesn't indicate that the market's not going to continue to go. It,
right.
it can continue to go.
Yeah,
And in fact, even when it's saying it's super crowded to the short side, that doesn't necessarily indicate that the market's going to go up. You
yeah,
know, it just means that there's some good risk reward there. All it really means is if the market starts to go up,
yeah,
right, for whatever random reason, that it could go up a lot because you have a lot of shorts that want to cover. That's all it tells me. People on our on Crowded Market Report and other people that I talk to tend to get that confused a lot. As soon as they see that the COT is crowded, they want to get involved in something. And a lot of times, especially with the people that have been around for a while on our thing, because they've seen it work before, we've had some really, really good trades, right, over the last 3, 4 years, you know. Um, and I keep telling them, like, yeah, you saw a great 2 years here. The last 2 years, I would argue, have been unusually good in my return stream, right? It's not always going to be like that. And the reason it's not always going to be like that is because the COT doesn't guarantee anything, just like nothing guarantees anything, right? All it does is mean the risk reward can be good. That's all it means,
Yeah.
and nothing else, which means that you have a 37% chance of this trade working. And if it works, it'll make you $4. And if it doesn't work, it'll lose you $1. And again, not every trade comes out to that math, but over time, that's where the math has come out to over a 25-year live history and
Yeah.
a 30-year tested history, right? That's where that math has come out to, right? Which again, even if you just take the live history, 25 years, tells you nothing about the next trade. Doesn't even tell you anything about the next quarter of trades, and it doesn't really even tell you anything about the next 2 years of trades, for that matter, right?
Right.
But over time, it should be indicative, right, of what's to come on a return stream basis, anyway. Hopefully, so this is what people get confused, not just with COT, with just about anything. It actually amazes me to watch people and how they quote other traders and gurus and all this, and it's like, oh, this guy nailed this last time, and this is what he's saying now. I'm like, okay, like it means nothing. The fact that he nailed this last time means absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? You can always find someone that nailed something somewhere because here's a bull and here's a bear. The
Yeah.
market either went up or it went down. One of those two guys nailed it, right? It
Right.
means nothing for what's going forward, but it amazes me sometimes the things that people put weight on. And it's the same thing with the COT. Just because the COT nailed this trade for us last time doesn't mean that it's going to nail it for us this time. It really doesn't. I wish it did, and I wish I could find someone that did do that. But I think I've been around long enough, and I'm realistic enough to realize that really doesn't exist. And so all you can do is play risk reward and do it over a long period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that. Right. It's just a game of numbers at that point. And
Yeah.
it's more about what we kind of started talking with, right? Which is not taking trades that aren't actually part of the system just because you haven't found a trade in a while and does not look good and you need to scratch the itch because you've been sat in front of your screens for days on end.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things are not, and this is again what I'm hopefully offering to people is, and most people, including myself, won't learn from other people, but because I've made so many of these mistakes over such a long period of time, I'm hoping that people can learn, and I'm showing people like, hey, I've made that mistake, man, and this is how it ends up looking, right?
Right.
Hopefully that can help some people avoid it. I know most people, including me, have to make their own mistakes to really learn their lessons.
Yeah.
But even with that, if I'm saying it and then they still don't listen, but then it does happen, maybe that'll help them learn the lesson quickly. I don't know, but I'm trying. And one of the things I say a lot is when you do that, the worst thing that can happen is you get off process and you make money. I can tell you that's the worst thing that can happen to you,
Right.
right? Because now you're learning bad habits, right? You're getting positive reinforcement for bad habits, right? And
That's happened to me for sure.
yeah, and over time, that's going to destroy you. I have never, to this point in my life, shot any heroin. But I would be willing to bet that when you shoot heroin, it feels really, really good, you know. Um, but the long-term consequence of it, that short-term good feeling,
Yeah,
is
tends to not end
clearly
well, right?
is clearly very bad. I think it's a similar thing. Um, Getting
Yeah.
off your process, making a trade because you're bored and having it work feels really, really good in the short term. But over the long term, it's going to kill you.
Yeah. And in those situations, a lot of times I really I shouldn't be doing that, or I shouldn't be doing this. I did this. It made a bunch of money for me. And then yeah, you get a little a dopamine hit or whatever it is. And they say, oh, I got away with it this time. Maybe I can get away with it again. And I was like, well,
Exactly.
I'm familiar enough with it to know that if I ended up doing that and got away with it, don't just don't do it. Don't do it again. You got lucky, right? It's kind
Well,
of
then the other thing happens too. You do that, you don't get away with it. You lose some money, and now you're like, oh shit, now I got to make that money back. So you try it again to make it right. You get into
right.
that trap too, right? Which is not very helpful. So, but again, these are all things that you can only really learn by making those mistakes,
Yeah,
which are painful, and hopefully you make them small so you can stick around long enough so that you can get past them, right?
yeah, for sure. Um, there's two sort of ways I kind of wanted to go. If I stick with just the process for a second, I'm curious about like when during the day you tend to place your trades. Do you look to actually execute, say like towards the end of the day, maybe having witnessed what you'd call a news failure, and it's like, oh, we've seen this already in the day, and now we're say closing higher, having fired down and recovered. Or is it like, do you have a systematic way of getting all of those trades in, and you just execute at the open, or how do you handle it?
The way that the process works is that if it's a news failure on the close of the day, then that's when the trade goes on. So theoretically, it's supposed to happen at the close of the day.
Yeah.
And that's for the most part what goes on. Although I will say that if I'm looking to short something and I'm looking for a piece of good news to come out and the market to fail on that good news on the close, by the close, and I get short. There are times like today where I'm targeting, okay, this thing is set up for a short. I'm targeting what the potential good news could be over the course of the week. It comes out, the market gaps up. I might sell into that. Um, in particular, if the market's sort of like, I'm not going to use the word overbought because I don't really have anything that tells me what's overbought, but let's just call it overbought for now. If the market's been going up a lot, people are super bullish. I know they're super bullish because they're super long. Otherwise, I wouldn't be looking to short it anyway. But the number comes out positive. I might short some into that number. But you're talking about maybe like 10% of a position, right? Of what will ultimately be my position.
Okay.
Uh, just so that if it then does fail, I can put more on.
Yeah.
My size can be better, and that helps obviously my returns. And if it doesn't fail, then I can get out. But I already sold into the strength to begin with on good news.
Right.
So probably a good part, not always, but most likely a good part of what was going to be the up day is already in there, right? So my loss becomes pretty limited there. So I will do those trades.
Okay. But that
Um,
that is still sort of like, you're early in that case, right? You're sort of predicting that it'll unwind, and it might
yeah.
not.
And might not. And if it doesn't, then I just get out. I
Right.
sometimes because I sold into the strength of the gap of the good news, I might not even lose money on that. Sometimes I will. It's usually a wash, over time. That's kind of a wash on that trade. And it's such a small thing, 1/10 of 1%,
Yeah.
of 1/10 of my position, you know, in that
Right.
situation, if I get it wrong, I'll maybe lose like 1/10 of 1 basis point. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's like a rounding error, but it helps me, like I say, size up should the trade start to work, and that's always good, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about that too. Do you scale in and out, or is it an all in and then all out? Aside
No,
from just what we've
it's
been talking about here.
it's all in or all out.
Yeah. Okay. And um, is it equally binary on whether it works or it doesn't? Like, are there any other exits besides, oh, we got stopped, or oh, we hit our profit, it's not a profit target, but you know what I mean? We hit our exit signal because we've come back to 50 on the
That's it.
okay. So when it comes back to the COT, when the COT comes back to 50, because it eventually will, and if
Yeah.
you're still in the trade at that point, then the profit is just whatever the profit is at that point. So that could be a 1 or 2x your initial risk, or that could be a 20x your initial risk. Yeah.
Hopefully the second one, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that keeps it nice and simple. But I'm also trying to, like, I'm thinking about for you having to be on all the time, scanning for the the entry signal, like the actual, like the pulling of the trigger because of a news failure. So does that get in the way of your, I don't know, how do you go on vacation? And
Sanity?
yeah, how do you go on vacation and keep tabs on, whether, oh shit, I think, gold is still firing higher or whatever it might be.
Uh, it's a life that I've been living for 35 years, so I guess I got used to it. But I have three markets that are set up, or two markets that are set up, and I know what the news flow up until the last few months, where the news flow has become a lot more random.
Wonder
Um,
why.
Yeah, but I know what the news flow is coming over the course of the week. I know because I'm paying attention every day, I know what kind of news flow has been driving it. There are times when inflation numbers are driving it, there are times when growth numbers
Lately.
are, so because I'm sort of paying attention, I kind of know what are the major ones that are driving it. So I know the days when those reports are coming out. So even if I'm on vacation, I mean, when I'm on vacation, I have my laptop with me. I have the internet. You know what I mean? I've
Yeah.
worked and traded from Africa, from wherever, right? So that's how you follow it. The truth is, I probably do better in times like that because I'm not overthinking. You know what I mean? It's very simple. Here's the news. It was a failure. Get short here. Like makes it a lot easier. I do sit in front of the screens and watch mostly because I'm watching for correlation and risk type of stuff. I know there's value at risk that things that you can buy and do, but I find those to be kind of garbage. I think that I can do a better job of monitoring correlations myself by just kind of watching them, because they change very quickly and I can watch that. That's mostly what I'm watching for. And then of course, listen, I've got hundreds of people now on the crowded market report that are watching this stuff too and debating, because that's a discretionary part of what I do. They sit there and have these great debates on was this a news failure? Was this a piece of positive news? Was it not? You know what I mean? So I kind of have a couple hundred partners here as well that are doing this with me. So just one more advantage of that whole thing. But yeah, I figure it out even when I'm on vacation.
So that must be a slightly weird thing to have, a couple hundred partners where I presume that before this, it was basically you on your own. And then what I gather also is that you get the COT report, which is giving you a view on how people are positioned, a certain group of people at least, like those large specs. Um, but I've also heard you say that, if you didn't have the COT report, you're looking at the general sort of financial media or the guy on the street or the guy in the cab. And, just it seems like you're listening out at all times to try to figure out when things are kind of overcooked on a particular side, right? And um, so you've got a few different sort of inputs there, is what it sounds like. But now you've got this group of people in your own community
Yeah,
who,
which I think what your point is, it gets confusing with that
right,
because can I use the people on here and say, oh, well, there's consensus,
right,
right? Or are these all people that like to look for anti-consensus, which they, for the most part, are? That's why maybe they were attracted to the stuff that I do.
yeah,
And so is that not consent? That becomes very hard and gets in my head a little bit. So what I try to do is not use the Discord necessarily as a consensus thing.
right,
Because what I did before I ever had the Discord was working. So I don't want to try and be too much of a wise guy because I don't know,
right,
what I mean? I've always been someone that wants to fade consensus no matter where it was, but now I'm trying to fade the consensus of the people that are trying to fade consensus. Like that's not really gonna,
yeah.
it just gets in my head and messes me up. So I try not to use the Discord as a as a consensus read.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I get that. But I guess at the same time, because you've got so many people sort of following things, they're probably going to give you a heads up to any sort of news failure event that you may or may not have missed, right? Like, so if you weren't around, or if there's something happening that wasn't going on, you probably see somebody in your room say, "Hey, what about this? Don't you think this matters?" And then if you hadn't been tracking it, you'd be
Well,
like,
there's no question. That's probably, I would say without a doubt, the number one question that I get asked on the Discord is, "Hey, Jason, do you think this was a news failure today?"
"Oh, okay,
So I don't,
yeah,
it's hard for me to miss that stuff. I always say, if you have to ask, and it probably wasn't, these news failures, you're talking about major turning points in markets, right?
yeah,
You shouldn't even have to question. It should be obvious.
right." Um, could I ask you what you're tracking these days? I think you said you had three on the list, and what's today is Friday, the 25th of April, 2025.
Yen,
Yen.
yen is the major one. Yeah,
You were in that earlier, weren't you? Earlier in the year?
and I got stopped.
Yeah. So just waiting for a reload on that one.
I'm getting back in today.
Okay.
We had some bullish yen news overnight, and the market is failing off of that. So I sold 10% of what I will ultimately be my position, I would guess. I don't know my full position until I know where the close is on the day, but
Okay.
more around what will end up being 10% of my full position. I sold into the bullish news.
Yeah.
Um, and then we'll see where it closes today, and provided it closes down, um, I will be putting the rest of the position on.
Okay. Great. Could I just, since we're talking markets briefly, ask your opinion on gold? And I haven't followed any of your recent thoughts on gold, but it seems like it's a market that's been heading one way for quite some time. Are you seeing that as crowded at all?
The COT has not shown crowd of gold. In fact, the COT has been showing that the speculators, who I am looking to fade at turns, have been selling gold since mid-February. They've been selling into this rally. That's straight up COT. But I'm asking myself, why is that?
Mm,
And how is that possible? Because if most of these people are trend followers would not be selling into this, right? By definition. And if the rest of them are macro people or whatever, macro people would not be selling into this either, right? The macro story for gold, whether right or wrong,
yeah.
not bearish. Hard to make a bearish macro story for gold here, right?
Yeah.
So how the hell are they selling it, right? So I have a couple theories as to why. One of the big ones is that the inflows into the gold ETFs are hitting records, right? And if I'm not mistaken, if I'm running a gold ETF and people give me a whole bunch of money, what I am buying is gold futures,
Right.
right? And I believe that those ETFs will show up as commercials and not large speculators.
Oh,
So I think that's why you're getting this here, right?
okay.
Because the commercials are getting longer, which means the speculators are getting shorter because it nets off, right? But behind those commercials are getting longer are actually a bunch of speculators getting longer in the ETFs. I think that's what's going on here.
Okay.
Otherwise it doesn't make sense to me. Um, Gold clearly earlier this week got overdone, and I actually said in one of my videos that I felt that it's easy to say it now in retrospect now that it's come off, but I actually said it in one of my videos, right? Um, there was I think it was Monday
Yeah, Monday.
where I was watching CNBC. I have it like on in the background. And they have people on there all day that they interview. They have fund managers come on there. What stock should we buy? What stock should we sell? Blah, blah. Every single one of the interviews on Monday ended with, "And what do you think about gold here?" Which is not a question that these people really ever ask, right?
Yeah.
So when you start to see things like that, you have to start thinking it's getting a little bit overdone.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of my feel on gold here. I can't short it because of the COT issue.
Yeah.
But again, that don't mean it can't go down.
Right.
'Cause I can't short it, It doesn't mean that it can't go down. So
Great. Well, look, Jason, I don't want to be respectful of your time. We've gone for about an hour and a half. Why don't we wrap it here? It's been a real pleasure for me, just chatting like this. I could go on for days, but maybe we'll do that another time if you're still up for it. Um,
anytime, man.
it's been really interesting for me, and I've loved watching all the stuff that you're doing. I think your work with the Crowded Market Report is really going to help a lot of people.
I
And
hope so. If it's not, I'm wasting a whole hell of a lot of time. But you
yeah,
know,
well,
I think it already is. Like I said, people send me messages all the time, so
uh,
that keeps me positive on the whole thing.
is that the best place for people to find you and learn more? Crowdedmarketreport.com.
Yeah, I mean that's the web page. I always encourage people to go to the YouTube
Yeah,
because that's all free.
yeah,
And therefore they can see if before they actually sign up and spend money or whatever, they can see if what I'm talking about makes sense to them, if they think that it fits into what they want to learn or what they want to do. You can get a real good feel of that on our YouTube because I do daily video. I've done weekly videos for like 3, 4 years. So there's hundreds of these videos. And you go on there and see if what I'm saying makes any sense to you and you think can help you and before you really sign up and spend any money, whatever. So I would encourage people to do that first.
yeah. And it's not
And
just that. You can actually say, "Oh, did what Jason said back then, how did that work out?" It's nice to be able to have a look at that and just kind of rewind the clock. Um,
yes, and I can tell you straight up, some of the things that I said were prophetic. And some of the things where I said were completely wrong.
yeah,
And I can promise you that that will always be the case. I I have not been able to figure out how to predict the future, unfortunately. You know,
yeah. No
they say
crystal ball.
predictions are very difficult, in particular about the future, right?
Yeah,
I think that right or wrong, I think I do a pretty good job of highlighting where there's risk reward in your favor, which to me, again, is really all this game is.
yeah.
It's not about anything other than that. So that's what I try and help people figure out.
Well said. I've checked out the YouTube. It's super useful. There's all kinds of stuff on there. Not just the daily videos. There's weekly videos. There's almost sort of like random rants where you go off on one, which is kind of the best.
Yeah,
Um,
I love my rants. Interviews,
interview.
what happens is we have like a Friday night on CMR. We'll do like a COT review because the COT comes out at 3:30,
Yeah,
and we'll get on there and we'll talk about like real quick look at what it's looking at. And then on Sunday nights before the market opens, we'll get on for like an hour and talk about the markets, which again, it's me talking about my thoughts, but I'm consistently encouraging everybody else. Please let me know what you think. I'm just one guy with one idea. Let's hear yours too, but we talk about that. So on occasion, on given who I am and how I am, given that much airtime, I will go off on a rant.
yeah,
Um, and when I go off on what these guys consider to be good rants, or entertaining rants,
right.
we'll take that tape. I won't, but the guy who runs the site will take that tape and just put it on YouTube just because he thinks it's so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, that, and then we actually have some good interviews too. I've been able to interview some pretty good people. Annie Duke, Larry Williams, a whole bunch of different people I've been able to interview as well. So
Well,
yeah, we have all kinds of stuff on there. So, and that's all free. So please check
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, I encourage people to check it out. Again, I'll thank you for your time. It's been great. I hope you keep doing what you're doing as long as it keeps making you happy, right?
Yeah.
So it's and also making videos every day might that's a lot of videos, and it's if that becomes too much at some point, nobody's going to get upset if you claw that back a little bit too, right? If you want to take a little time for yourself, I wouldn't think anyway. Um, but
Yeah, I mean, look, I do what I do. You know what I mean? And if I can't do it any longer, then I won't do it. I'm trying to get as much stuff out there while I still can.
yeah,
And hopefully that will leave some sort of legacy that can help people, you know.
Well, it already is. I can tell you that for sure.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Cool. Well, again, thank you for your time. I'll let you run. Jason, thanks so much. And I look forward to hopefully talking to you again at some other point.
Anytime, Jeff. Anytime. It's a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you, buddy. Have a great rest of your week and weekend.
All right, man.